Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Dara Albright. I'm the founder of dWealth Education, and I'm so thrilled to be hosting today's webinar session, which will focus on how tokenization is being used to increase brand loyalty and drive sales. This webinar is part of a Learn to Earn webinar series in partnership with Club dVIN. Club dVIN is the world's premier global wine club that is transforming the investment-grade wine market through blockchain innovation. This webinar series is designed to bring blockchain education and economic opportunity to all those involved in the global wine trade, including wineries, winemakers, collectors, financiers, and of course, even the everyday investors who are simply seeking portfolio diversification and better risk-adjusted returns that wine provides. Now, in addition to leading-edge educational content that you won't find anywhere else, all of you attending our live sessions will be earning a number of rewards that will allow you to monetize your webinar participation. Everything from tokens to fintech products to tickets to wine events, membership discounts, and so much more. Towards the end of today's session, we'll be discussing today's rewards and how to claim them, so please stick around. Also, as always, we're going to be raffling off another bottle of rare wine, so please stick around for that too. And with us today, we have co-founders of Club dVIN, who will be discussing innovative ways that blockchain and Web3 are helping wineries improve consumer outreach and capture the $75 billion in revenue that they miss out on each year simply because of lack of direct access to consumers and supply chain data. Also with us is Kaylin Sliney, the CEO of Magnetic. Kaylin is a venture capital lawyer, angel investor, Web3 builder, and cyclist. I guess we're going to find out that in a few seconds. Kaylin will be discussing how brands today are leveraging Web3 for brand building and community development. I think she's going to be doing that while she's on the bike, as well as the Peloton, as well as with a glass of wine in hand. So I think that was a dare. So that should be a lot of fun.
It was.
So just a few housekeeping items before we start. If you all please notice on your dashboard on the upper right part of your screen, there you'll see there's a chat section, a section for Q&A, a section where you could basically share your thoughts. Please use that with the chat section. Q&A, we like to save that for questions. Sometimes we don't answer the questions till the very end. Sometimes the presenters will field them as they come in. So just feel free to use the Q&A section and ask the questions as they come to you. There's also a whole bunch of emojis that you could use to express yourself, if you see that on the bottom of your screen. We like the smiley faces and hearts the best. Yeah, there you go. I see a bunch coming in. We don't really like the sad faces, but feel free to
No sad faces.
Right, no sad faces. Also, if you want to just test out the chat function, make sure it's working for you, feel free to type in what wine you brought today that you're drinking with us on today's webinar. I know I have brought myself a little bit of a glass of Sauvignon Blanc today. It's chilled and it's very hot here in Atlanta, so I needed something cold. So with that, let's just, before we dive in, maybe we'll just do a quick poll and get an idea of who's joining us today. So if you could let us know what best describes you. Are you an investor, wine collector? Are you a winemaker? Are you from a winery? in the wine business? Are you a financial professional or in the blockchain tech space? And feel free to answer that so we could get an idea. It just helps us kind of better gauge who's with us today. And I see those are coming in. Looks like we've got a lot of financial professionals, blockchain executives, we've got a little bit of everything. And with that, I am going to hand it off to our presenters. And let's dive in.
All right, should we start with some intros?
I think that sounds great.
All right, I'll start off.
Jana, you go first.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Jana Kryline. I'm one of the co-founders of dVIN with Dave here. And my background is very much wine focused. Been in the wine industry for over a decade and kind of worked in all different areas, starting with, the traditional sommelier education. Then I learned winemaking in Germany, kind of went through all aspects of that, ended up in export, started a wine communication brand, ended up kind of doing a wine influencer gig, traveled around the world and did wine communication for some of the biggest brands out there. You may have heard of, Lafite and Ruffino and those kind of brands. And then I ended up filming some television projects, one of which I think that's actually how you found me.
Yeah.
Some wine media projects, and then kind of stumbled into wine and blockchain. And that was about 3 years ago. And since then have just been absolutely all in and just fascinated by the potential that it brings to the wine industry and all the problems that it solves. So, hi.
Kaylin, you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Kaylin Sliney, and as Dara already mentioned, I had a career as a lawyer. I'm still practicing, but now it has moved completely to the side in favor of my full-time gig, which is building Magnetic, which is a digital platform for brand communities. We are based on the blockchain, but we have a completely Web 2 user experience. And something I'm incredibly passionate about is empowering communities through tokenization, but with a much more practical bend. We don't lean heavy into the tech or the technical terms. We just use it to power better experiences for consumers. And the reason we were joking about the fact that I'm both drinking kava and currently on a Peloton, Dave did make a suggestion, and hilariously, it was something that I put out to my community and had a vote. Should I do this webinar from the seat of a bike, which I am doing. And so that is the point there, is that there are lots and lots of small things you can do to solicit feedback from your community and get them to feel like they're participating, right? They can have feedback and input, whether it is, should I, Jana, we saw each other in London. I was speaking and I wasn't sure what I should wear on stage. I put it up to a community vote and folks picked this wild patterned mushroom getup. It was a matching top and skirt set. But when I posted photos from that event, so many people were like, you went with the mushroom, right? They felt like they were invested in the decision making at a level that just gave them some sort of input. And I think that brands and communities can do this from really silly sounding things all the way up to, we don't know what colorway we want to make our next sneaker. We're not sure who the community would be the most excited about us collaborating with. You can leverage from the tiniest, silliest seeming thing up to really major decisions at a brand level that are catering to the people who are your deep participants. And I think at a brand level, that's something that has gone historically underutilized. Creating experiences, collaborating, and co-creation are things that I really see as the future of marketing, instead of telegraphing at an audience using ads in every place, these flat digital ads. We get bombarded with them. And something I think is so cool about what you guys are doing is you are taking this three-dimensional experiential tasting elements and involving winemakers and wineries and the people who love their wine to create more robust and multi-dimensional experiences. So I'll stop there, and step off my soapbox, but that is me, and I'm really excited to be here with you.
Well, don't get off the bike though. because you
I will
gotta.
not.
cut the bike.
If I make anybody seasick, you've got to let me know. I'm trying not to sway, but I am pedaling and I will continue to do so.
That's awesome. So I'm Dave Garrett. I'm also a co-founder of dVIN, and I'll say that whenever we put anything to a community vote, what we always hear back is more Jana, less Dave. So I've put a stop to the community voting at dVIN, but only for that reason.
That feels
So
fair.
I've been in the tech business for a while, and the wine business for about the last 20 years. In kind of every continent. I worked in Argentina. I built a vineyard there. Worked in Asia. Spent a bunch of time in California working with wineries in Paso Robles and Napa. And now I'm here in Spain with a little project in the Priorat, just south of here. And what's universal across the wine industry is a disconnect between the winemaker and the wine lover. And that's for a bunch of different reasons, but most importantly, it kind of has to do with the nature of wine, right? Whenever you taste a really great wine, it was typically made 10 years ago by somebody 10,000 miles away. So that connection is actually really difficult because it's like broken by time and space. And one of the things that we're doing with blockchain is figuring out a way to connect the winemaker and the wine lover at the moment of consumption.
And rewarding them rewarding the consumer, and the winemaker gets a win too. We'll tie it all together.
100%.
So maybe we should start with talking a little bit about community, since that's sort of the focus and where we've kind of started with this, and maybe talk about maybe Kaylin, you could talk a little bit about how communities are coming together through tokenization, and then we'll jump in and we'll go more specific and go really dive into the wine business, particularly.
That sounds great. Yeah. So at a high level, there are so many consumer engagements that brands, creators, influencers, folks are trying to track, so that part of it is less altruistic, part of it is for monetization, right? That they're running businesses. But a lot of it is to figure out, we take engagement data and we try to synchronize it through various CRMs. We buy data back from Meta properties, from TikTok, from Google Ads, and we're always trying to paint a more robust picture of what is it that my consumer wants and how can I better predict that in the future from data I have today. And so a lot of what's happening is, friction points across the internet. So much of our interaction now is digital. You lose people at every place and time that you're sending them off on another journey, right? And so the way that we see community engagement is to keep the multidimensionality of those experiences, whether they're events in person, whether it's feedback, whether it's, product input and co-creation, whether it's, did you view these behind the scenes content, whatever it is, we want to understand, are people receptive to it? It's a very simple and base nature of, did they like what I put out, right? And there are so many more facets to it nowadays that we are bombarded by choice, that most things in our world are commodities. And what people really are drawn to is community over commodities, right? Like, there were so many trendy suitcases in a bubble in the late teens and early 20s. And now, that spawned a million competitors. And now what's the difference but price? Well, do you identify with what one of them makes you feel? What is a brand, right? A brand is no one thing. It's what people say about you when you're not in the room. And how do you build that sentiment, that emotion? How do you build the connection, but for engagement? And I don't mean clicks or eyeballs on a screen, because those can be pretty two-dimensional and they don't necessarily translate to something broader. But I think what we're seeing is people expect a more robust experience. They expect to be able to connect over some shared interest, whatever that interest is, whether it's wine, whether it's travel, whether it's video games, whether it is knitting. And the thing that keeps people around and keeps them together is feeling like there's a silver thread that's kind of joining them together. And so what we see in the tokenization aspect is really being able to anchor this information without making it sort of Big Brother-esque, right? I mean, with blockchain particularly, you can abstract away personal information and you can let people go about their business, all while monitoring what is it that they're interacting with and where else are they on the internet and what have they done? How can we get some insight into what I say is what they do with the other 23 and a half hours of their day? So what, they like your product. Well, what else is part of their lives, and how can you embed yourself more in that? How can you get a little bit more market share of their day by catering to them, not by bothering them and not by chasing them with more ads, but actually figuring out, well, what other products and services do they love? And can we partner together? Can we create limited edition? Can we do some bespoke one-offs? And I think the beauty of blockchain is really enabling and empowering these types of experiences without getting in the way. I'm probably the most anti-consumer. I hate being sold to. I hate feeling advertised to. But I will say that once I'm loyal, I definitely want more of that thing or that service. I want to be closer to it. And I think a lot of people feel the same way, where they don't want to be bothered by the mess, but when they're there, they're really there. And so we're seeing the expectation change, that you now give more of yourself as a brand, as a winemaker, for instance. Like, it's phenomenal. There's this rich history. There are these broad reaching roots, and people want to be more involved with that. And these types of tokenized experiences that can continue to build on one another do actually enable. So I'll
it's
stop.
interesting because you mentioned a really interesting point when you talk about like the different, you're talking about all these capturing different points of their day. So are you seeing like brands in different industries coming together to do cross marketing and
Yes.
cross promotions?
And it's something that folks are so excited about, because if I'm honest, I'll use these as complete hypotheticals. My AirPod. Complete hypotheticals, but let's say if I drank Athletic Greens every single morning and I worked out at SoulCycle every afternoon, and then I came home, but I used my Dagny and Dover bag and I religiously to, port all my stuff around between these things and whatever. When you start to connect the dots, you'll see that there is a consumer profile that utilizes all of these things. And if you can start leaning into this, what I would call psychographic data, it's the things people do, care about, think about, the values that they have. It's not just what they buy, where they shop, where they live, and how much money they make, right? We segregate psychographic from demographic data. And we're seeing a shift where people are no longer falling into boxes of single cis het, well, from Nebraska between the ages of 40 and 45 with an income of X, right? Like, that used to be the way we segregated advertising, and it is so largely irrelevant these days, because you never know. Does this guy go and get his nails done every week? Does he love nail polish? If you were, maybe he's the next nail influencer and you would have totally missed him. And he might have the coolest art and the biggest following, but you as a brand would never have known, because you were making assumptions instead of actually looking at, well, let's just see what else this person is buying, where else they're engaging, and put together this thread of profile that's based on actual activity and interest rather than assumed, let's say, purchasing power and demographics. Dave, you were going to say something earlier.
That's great. No, look, I was going to say a lot of the stuff that you were saying really resonates. Like the idea behind like brand affinity couldn't possibly be more important than in the wine industry, right? Like, you talk about choice, you go to a wine shop and every product is the same, right? So they say the value of brand is, or the value of any product is the utility of that product plus the brand value, right? Mm-hmm. And nowhere is that more clear than in wine. Because if you go into a wine shop, every single bottle has the same utility. right? They're all the same size. They're all the same shape. They're all the same weight. They're all the same color, more or less. Maybe there's white and red and bubbly. They all have the same, more or less the same kind of a kick to them, like maybe a little bit more alcohol in some, a little bit less in terms of, you know, if that's the utility that you're looking for. But basically they're all the same.
Into Cat Franc.
And you walk into when you walk into a wine shop, there's like hundreds or thousands that are all exactly the same, but some are $5 and some are $500. And the difference between the $5 and the $500 is brand identity, is brand value, is the storytelling that you can do. And that affinity, you know, you deciding that you know that brand's story and you make that brand part of your identity, like turning that, like that customer is the most valuable customer in the world, because they'll buy from you over and over and over and over again for years. And that's been proven by, you know, every data study that they do in the wine industry. The problem is, how do you do that? And like Jana is kind of knows, like I know the problems. Jana knows the solutions, right? She's been out there talking for wine brands for a long time.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was always really difficult on social media, right? Like I did wine, again, we'll say wine influencing, right? Which is why I hate that term. But it was really difficult to kind of like communicate wine and make a living out of that on social media. So it was easy. It was easier back in the days when Instagram was really pumping and everyone understood the algorithm to build community and feel like, you know, you were actually, it was a lifestyle. Like the brands that I was talking to, what they were really interested in was like, can you actually, one of the really interesting things was when I worked with Lafite, because they were like, we want to reach a younger demographic, you know, like this was for them a new kind of outreach. Social media, we want our wines to get into the hands of the younger generation because we're seeing statistically that younger people aren't drinking these kind of wines. And so like panic, what do we do? How do we reach them? But the problem with the wine industry, and this is kind of, you know, one of the big things that blockchain can solve is it's like, you can't just go and buy those wines, right? Like you want to be connected with those winemakers, but like you aren't, because the wine industry, the way it is just so like opaque. You can't get in. And so that's like a big,
and built on scarcity.
Exactly. So it's like, here it is. It's, you know, you want this, right? You want to have these things. It's a shiny thing, but you can't buy it if you try. You don't have access. So how do we change that?
I'm curious your take on standing out in the crowd, right? There are stories and there are, as you know, Dave, you were saying, the utility is largely the same. And there is a lot of, the difference is in the storytelling. It is in, you know, the context and the branding and the history and so many elements and factors. Are you seeing tokenization as a way to kind of cut through the noise? Is there, I mean, is that something? Is it just sort of like, well, once you happen to find something you love, we can build on that? Or do you see a way for it to help cut through the noise writ large?
Well, I would say, you know, kind of stepping back a second, community, you know, the wine industry is thousands of years old, right? And the wine industry was sort of built in the beginning around community, right? In France, in Italy, in Spain, in Argentina. Like, you wouldn't be going to the corner shop to buy a bottle of wine. You would take your damajuana like into the winery, and like you'd be getting your wine for the week right out of the tank and then taking it home. And like the community was all of the people that like would buy wine from that same place. So like that was kind of the original, like kind of some of the original senses of community were built around wine. So now we kind of look at community around wine and we think wine clubs. You know, you're a member of a wine club at a particular winery, and that gives you, you know, access to that winery's wine. It gets you learn a little bit about the story. You maybe have access to go and visit the winery and like go there for events or like a pickup party or a harvest event. But like what I find is the most valuable about that is not necessarily once you get that customer. Like that customer, great, they've managed, maybe they found their way into your tasting room or they found their way to you. where they're the most valuable is not necessarily in the money that they're going to spend with you over the next 2 or 3 years. It's in them as a brand ambassador. Like,
Absolutely.
I know that my favorite thing in the world to do is, like, when I'm going to a dinner party, I'll look at my wine cellar and I'll pick out a wine that's a story that I want to tell to the people that I'm having dinner with, right? Either because it's relevant to them, or because I know the story of the wine. And if I can go in and tell the story of that wine while we're drinking it, even if it's just like 2 or 3 interesting things, not only is that fun for me because I get to be like the knowledgeable wine dude, but it's also super valuable for the winemaker because now I've brought more people into that story, and maybe they'll buy that wine and then go and take it to their friends' dinner party and be an ambassador for them. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with tasting tokens.
Absolutely. We at Magnetic use a similar concept, which is to say, take your most enthusiastic. We're not trying to reach absolutely everyone. We don't think everyone needs to be part of your community, whether you're a winemaker or a travel gear maker or a musician. You don't need everyone in there. But what you do need is to be able to give more value to the people who love you the most. And maybe you can inspire sort of those in the middle barometer to hop up. But once they're there as your super fans or your enthusiasts, you can really empower them to become your on-the-ground influencers, honestly. And Dave, you make an interesting point, because I remember being blown away when a fellow wine enthusiast brought a bottle to me and gave a full story about why he had chosen it. It was an all-female winemaking team, and there was there were geographic similarities. It was basically my life story, but they had gone into winemaking, and it was just such an earnest gesture, but also a huge promo for that winery. And I think that we all like to do similar things. When we're excited about something, we want to share it with the people we care about. And word of mouth marketing is honestly elite. I mean, it still reigns supreme as the best way to go, because even and especially now that we're inundated with choice, we enter analysis paralysis. And it's like, just tell me what you love. You're someone I trust. Tell me what you enjoy, and then I'll try that. Maybe it'll work for me, maybe I won't, but I'll tell you, I'm probably 100 times more likely to try that than just pick something random off the shelf or in an Amazon, recommendations list. It doesn't matter where in the universe you are. That is how we as humans tend to operate. Some people are hyper analytical and just want even consumer reports. We've decided, right, it's a trusted source, and so I'm going to go there first and think about, who do I trust and what did they trust? So when you can sort of harness that power and amplify people's efforts on your behalf, you're doing yourself a huge service, but you're also making them look great to their, the people that trust them or the people that trust their palate.
Sure, 100%.
So one of the things that is so intriguing is that, this whole concept of data and the role that data plays. And maybe you could weigh in a little bit on that, because, we've always had communities throughout time, but now we have technology that makes, the data so much more, accessible. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how data is really transforming, especially the communities and the way for brands to engage with their consumers.
Maybe this is an opportunity, Dave, to just quickly break down, for the wine industry at least, the kind of issue with data in the first place, right? Because the way the wine industry works, for anyone watching this who doesn't know, when a wine leaves the cellar, it basically gets to the first point of sale, and then the winemaker loses visibility, right? And then it goes 5 layers through the supply chain. It might trade on the secondary market 3 or 4 times, and the winemaker has no idea who's drinking it. And so if they had that data, right, if there was a way to actually track that bottle through the supply chain, and then, here we go, reward the end consumer for giving that data back to the winemaker, wouldn't that be great for brand loyalty for the winemaker, right? So having them be able to collect a token, or sorry, give out tokens basically to say whoever's collecting these tokens of mine, whoever's been drinking my wine, can now build up their status with me directly, right? So I know who my super fans are, because I know Kaylin had just touched on that. But then I'm sure Dave and Kaylin, you want to go deeper into the data thing. I just wanted to like lay that over top.
No, that's great.
Yeah, so data, you know, every industry over the course of the last 20 years since you know, really since the internet has gone through some sort of digital transformation, right? Like more and more industries they're making decisions not just based on intuition or anecdotes, they're making decisions based on data. And those decisions are everything from, you know, product development to packaging to marketing to you know, supply chain efficiency. Like there's lots and lots, all of those decisions are made with data, and that's actually made companies significantly more profitable. The wine industry just hasn't been able to do that. It just doesn't have the access to that data. We look at it kind of in comparison to like similar products. So look at the beer industry, for example. The beer industry is super, super connected, right? Because you've got you have two really nice things with beer. You've got a product that you can make more of if you want, so you can kind of make an unlimited amount of beer if you've got, you know, if you've got the facilities, and you can see all the way down into the supply chain. Like a beer manufacturer can literally look at an individual store and see a depletion report of how much beer has been sold that day in that store. Like the wine industry is so totally different from that. You get nothing in the wine industry. You have no data at all, which means that they're still making decisions the same way that they made them, you know, 100 or 1,000 years ago, based on intuition. And that, you know, that worked for a while, but we really think that not only is that has that caused margins to really, really shrink. While margins have grown in nearly every other industry, they've really shrunk in the luxury wine industry. And you see wineries making less and less money every year because they don't have the data to be responsive to their customers. And then, you know, I mean, that's kind of the biggest problem with data that we see. And like figuring out a way to solve that was really difficult to solve without the blockchain, because the reason that the beer company can look at the store is that it's a bunch of big companies, right? It's a bunch of big companies with a lot of technology, and they can connect all that technology and they can look into the store. But the wine industry, it's like a little tiny winery in France selling to a little tiny importer in like Pennsylvania that sells to a little tiny distributor that sells to a little tiny wine shop. Like when you're buying a $50 bottle of wine, you're not buying it at Ralph's or Wegmans. You're buying it at like a little tiny corner wine shop that like doesn't have, you know, any connectivity. They're still running the credit card through the swiping thing, right? Like they don't have the tech.
Jenna, that's what I was thinking of, was
I've seen that. Okay.
With the pink copy, the yellow copy, and the top white copy. Right. Absolutely.
That's exactly right. And they're keeping their inventory on a clipboard hanging off the wall. So they just don't have that data. And that's just true all the way up the chain, even to the winemaker. So like no one in that chain is technological. So I
really hope you leverage that for your blockchain sort of marketing efforts when you're saying you can find people all the way up the chain. I really hope that comes in somewhere.
That's Jana's responsibility. The marketing stuff, that's Jana. But that's really it. Like it is this chain of you know this chain of performers, or this chain of actors that have not gone through a digital transformation. And so blockchain allows us to take this decentralized group of actors and offer incentives for them all to start acting together in a way that before you could really only do if you had a centralized industry.
Yeah.
So maybe you could also weigh in, because a lot of people that are maybe coming from a traditional, very traditional industry, like, the wine industry, they may feel a little, uncomfortable with the technology. They're not tech savvy. So talk about how Club dVIN comes into that process to help them, that you don't really need to have that, tech savvy in order to really make that leap from the traditional way of doing things into the blockchain realm.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, what we've done from the beginning is try to remove as much friction as possible. And I know Kaylin was saying at the beginning, what you've been building is very Web 2, right? Like, and that's the same with us. So anybody, I mean, when we sat down at the very beginning of this and we're thinking, okay, who are we talking to first? It was like, okay, you've got your wine natives who are crypto curious, and then you've got your crypto or Web3 natives who are maybe wine curious, and like, where do these people overlap in the Venn diagram, and how comfortable are they going to be with, having a wallet or, all of this kind of like NFT, crypto, Web3 language. And so we just went out from the beginning and we're like, we're going to eliminate all of that and just make this as a front facing, very Web 2. And then, I mean, Dave can speak more, and this will actually be in our next Learn to Earn webinar. We'll be talking with Deloitte about how we're going to actually put some of this in action with the wineries. But the idea is really that everybody just kind of feels like they've got an account, right? It's very, very simple. You come in, you log in with your email or your phone number, and then you've got your dVIN account, right? You don't have to be a member of Club dVIN. This is dVIN, and you can do anything you want. You just always log back in the same way, just like you would with any of your other accounts online.
We made sure from day one that it never says blockchain anywhere, NFT, you don't see crypto, you don't see wallet, everything is completely abstracted out. And we did that on purpose. I'm a tech guy. My dad is a technophobe. And I, for years and years, was always trying to get him to do a new thing, try this and try, the one that I remember all the time is, and then super relates to this, is MP3s. My dad's a music nut. And I'm going to burn all of your CDs on MP3 and I'm going to put 1,000 songs in your pocket. And he was like, MP3? I'm not going to do that.
Burn?
I'm never doing that. Yeah, burn MP. What are you talking about? And he would have said at the time, I'm never going to listen to MP3s ever. And I think that if you asked him today, are you listening to MP3s? Even though he's on Spotify all day long, all the time, he'd be like, no, what's an MP3? Right? Because it doesn't, the name of the technology using those acronyms, that doesn't really matter. What matters is the benefit. Do you get the benefit? And so what we've abstracted everything down to is A, as little friction as possible, and B, what's the benefit? We're not trying to draft off of blockchain or NFT frenzy. We're trying to create really, really cool experiences and great rewards for customers.
Yeah, I would echo that. We've been building since July of 22 without the reason we're called magnetic and our NFTs are called magnets is because it doesn't matter that it's an NFT. I mean, that just makes your experience better. You get more tailored experiences. The brands get better insights and analytics. It's in real time. This is the database wars. My co-founder and I talk about this often, where the database wars of the 90s, it doesn't matter what chain you're on. There are certainly pros and cons and certain use cases and things like that. But for the average consumer who just wants what's on the other side of the hurdle, they're not interested in blockchain. They're interested in what's on the other side of that. And as Yannick said, hi, it's the what, not the how anymore. Absolutely. Because the trend wave is volatile and we see trends come and go. And sometimes, it would be amazing to go back to the height of 2021 where financing for anything that involved the word NFT, I feel like we're there with AI now, gets funded immediately. But the problem is there are very low scruples around what's actually being built, and you have to be thoughtful if you're building something for the long term. So when we talk about changing the game of consumerism as a macro concept, you have to do something so meaningful, but in the most incremental way that does not create big blockers for people and doesn't, raise high hurdles to say, you need to set up a wallet, you need a 12-word seed phrase that you need to keep in a fireproof safe, it's bolted to your cellar. This is so intimidating to people, especially if you're talking about, and I don't minimize it, but just joining a community. We're not talking about your retirement account's worth of money as an investment. We're talking about day-to-day activities where we're encouraging people to adopt a new technology that moves everybody forward. And you physically cannot shove that down people's throats to say, do these 47 steps before onboarding, and then we promise you'll have a cool experience. It could be the best thing since sliced bread, but your average person doesn't have time for that, nor do they have interest in it. And it's intimidating, it's time consuming, etc. So like your father, Dave, of course, nobody wants to hear about the next newfangled thing unless they understand what it does for them. What does it bring to them? How does it make their life better, easier? Most of us don't know how our iPhone works. We don't really care. We know that we have a camera, a calendar, communications all in our pocket. That's it, right? And so I think as we look to meaningfully drive adoption and not just give it lip service and throw buzzwords around, we have to think about what is the experience that will actually encourage people to step over the lowest hurdle possible in the first place, keep that as low as possible. But what can you do on the other side of it that incentivizes them to at least try? And I think dVIN is an incredible example because people who love wine. So when you can let them know that they're getting something more out of what is for many people way more than just a hobby, you can really encourage adoption, I think, through these dedicated use cases that have to do with what's part of our everyday lives. Buying brands that we love, engaging in hobbies and, channels of engagement that we really adore, things that bring people together, whether it's eating in fine restaurants. I think, Dave, another interesting parallel to what you're talking about with the wine industry where people lose visibility is luxury goods, right? There's another use case there, and there are a few, but one is supply chain tracking for really high-end luxury goods. But as you were talking about, the loss of visibility, because so often it's not the end consumer who's buying the bag, let's say. It's somebody buying a gift, or it's an assistant, or it's somebody is an intermediary very often. And I hear a lot of luxury brands talk about how it's actually incredibly difficult to figure out who their end consumer is unless you've got a database a la Hermes and you're registering whoever buys a bag, right? There are a lot of things like that where people have so much love and so much affinity for these aspects of their lives that they would be willing to try something new in order to get more out of the experience. But we have to be thoughtful about how we build that and whether or not we're being too tech lingo focused. We could talk about the features of our platform all day long. And if you really need a good sleep story, I'll record it. But the point is, can you get more out of an experience with a brand or a community that you love? Yes? Great, I'll try it. No? Or if the benefit's not apparent enough, I'm going to write it off and we'll have a lot more friction to adoption.
100%, yeah. I don't know what else to say. That's exactly right. But, we could talk more about, one of the things that we've been developing to kind of focus in on this community element is taking a look at how wine clubs work right now and tokenizing the club itself. So we did this really kind of fun project with a couple of new wineries. So one of them is I don't know why they're always basketball players, but we did a project with Carmelo Anthony, who has a little project in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and Tony Parker, who's got a little project in Avignon. Both of them make they're both NBA players. They're both huge wine lovers. They're both retired now, but they have huge followings. And about a year apart, both of them launched little brands, and both of them have been members of Club dVIN for a long time, and like we have been sort of working with them to kind of I helped them a little bit on the side with their brand and their branding, but we said, okay, well, how can we help you to build a long-lasting community? And we created this tokenization concept called the allocation token. And the allocation token is basically, the way it works is for wineries that have way more demand than supply, they get to decide who gets my wine, right? Who is it that gets to buy it? And for 1,000 years, the way that that's worked is there's a list, right? And like as soon as somebody doesn't want the wine anymore, they get crossed off the bottom of or the top of the list, and then they take the person at the bottom of the list, and now you have an allocation. The problem is that's not really very efficient, and it's not. It also doesn't provide huge benefits either way. There's not a big benefit to the winemaker. There's not a big benefit to the person who's sitting on the list, or even the person who has the allocation. So what we did is we said, okay, well, what if we took that right to buy a bottle of wine and turn it into, from a social contract, which is just kind of like you say that that you give me the right, and we turn it into a real contract, a smart contract. And so the allocation token is a token that says I have the right to buy 6 bottles of wine, right? These are wines that sell out in 2 seconds every year. But with this token, I know that I can get my 6-bottle allocation every year. And then we've added to that a bunch of kind of fun utility stuff. Like Jana just went to the pickup party for Tony Parker in Avignon at one of the biggest, oldest chateaus in Avignon that they've been refurbishing, and it's beautiful and it's fun, and everybody got to go and hang out and drink rosé and swim in the endless pool. And I think Tony and his business partner made them dinner at the end of the night. Like you guys spent like 12 hours there, right? So, but like that kind of experience, like these people are going to buy that wine forever. And more importantly, now like 3 things happen there. For the winemaker, those allocation tokens were sold in the beginning. So the winemaker got basically cash flow to be able to kind of start this new brand. Also, now the winemaker doesn't have to do any marketing because he knows exactly who's going to buy the wine every year. So that's kind of cool. And then you as the consumer, you've got that token, and if you don't want that one anymore, you can sell the token to somebody else, and you can sell it probably at a profit, right? Oh, yeah. Because Tony Parker is putting all this utility in it, right? It's not just the wine, it's the wine plus you're now a member of this exclusive club, and you get to go and hang out with Tony Parker once a year at the chateau. And like, there's all of these kind of fun things. Tony is now incentivized to make those allocation tokens worth more by providing more value and more value to the loyalty. And you as a consumer, that loyalty, instead of just being ephemeral, now it's worth something, right? You can actually take that loyalty token and sell it to someone else. So look, we're experimenting with it. I don't know where it's going to go, but that's super fun, right? That's now tokenizing community to the extent where it can actually, your membership in that community is an asset.
Yeah. I'm sure folks are familiar with the Fly Fish Club that Gary Vaynerchuk and his restaurant group have done, VCR. Similarly, an interesting concept, because not only can you consider that an asset where you can certainly resell the membership, they haven't started it yet, but the objective is that you can rent it out. You can let someone else use your membership and get paid for it. If you aren't currently using it, you can actually use it as a rentable asset like real estate.
So cool.
It's a very neat concept, but largely incentivizing, and we at Magnetic always say sort of good behavior begets good behavior. If you treat your consumers well, they will treat you better in return, and the virtuous cycle continues. And that is driving value for everyone, because the happier your community members are, the more excited they are to share their experiences and what they're getting out of it, which makes it more valuable at the end of the day. So if you have a cut of secondary sales, whatever it is, or you just benefit from, the goodwill associated with elevated brand imaging. So the better that you treat your community, the better they will treat you in return. And, the stickier it becomes. And when you were in early, you also feel like a champion of something new and fresh, and getting in at the ground level is very cool. So folks who are open to that sort of experience can really derive a lot of benefit that doesn't have anything to do with the wine or the restaurants, right? There's a lot to being an early adopter that you can also drive the direction as well, right? Because if you're getting feedback and you're actually listening to it, you'll see what folks want, and they feel like they are, going back to earlier, our discussion on co-creation, they feel like they're steering the ship a bit, and that only serves to get them more invested. And so it's a really interesting feedback loop where if you can capture folks, Jenny, you were talking about data earlier, and something we hear so often is, we're so focused on the thing that we do, whether it's events, a podcast, a newsletter, like we capture people for a moment and then we lose them. We don't know where they are, who they are. We don't know if they come to every banger we throw, or if they were just here once and maybe something turned off a whole swath of people, and maybe we needed to analyze like what happened at that event, right? There's so much that you can do with the data that has nothing to do with objective monetization. It is more about making the experience better. But I think that the beauty of blockchain, brand equity, absolutely. And you're really starting to lean into delivering on your promise as a brand. And often you don't even know what that promise is until you listen to the community to figure out what they want. You've started in a place where maybe they love the wine, maybe they love the story, maybe they love the history, maybe they love Tony Parker. Maybe they love Eva Longoria from 20 years ago. I don't know, right? You don't know how and why people get into the fly trap. But once they're there, do you not want to understand more about what will keep them there? And that's where I think we're also, we look at customer acquisition costs are consistently rising. And with such a plethora of choice and with a lot of commoditization comes the idea of catch and release, where you've got them once. But do you ever get them again? Did you figure out why you got them in the first place? Maybe you had a funny t-shirt on Instagram and they converted immediately, but they'll never remember your brand name, or is there something deeper going on? Is there a cultural movement that this resonates with? And until we start uncovering the why, I think that's where a lot of folks they really lose the repeat demographic or the retention. And it's largely because they're not even investigating the data. They're not even trying to understand, why are you here? How did you find us? And what would keep you here? And when you figure that out, it is so often not what you thought to start with. It's so frequent that folks are like, well, I thought this is why we got all these followers. But turns out, Sophie Ellis-Bextor's song was played on Saltburn, and it, and it revitalized a hit from the 80s. And if you didn't really pay attention, you could just look at the data that says that song has gotten an ungodly amount of plays, and we're not sure what happened. And when you start to trace it back, you can expand, you can kind of crack open this nut and say, well, what else is in here? Like, what is driving? Is it nostalgia? Was it just a great beat? Was it a cultural movement? Are people's parents watching it and they loved her? Whatever it is, doing that sort of analysis to me is really fascinating. And I think with blockchain, we can truly get a lot of these. This is also part of the psychographic data analysis rather than demographic, rather than making assumptions. Look at what else other people are doing. And now you can amplify the feedback loop. and say, all right, well, we can actually recreate this driver or that momentum because we knew what brought it on in the first place, rather than guessing and kind of like fishing over and over and catching the same customer and releasing them, or like having a flashy label on a bottle might get some people in, but once they're there, how do you keep them, and what is the story you tell, right? So I think these are some of the most fascinating problems that we can confront, and there's so much more depth there than traditional channels of, data analysis and what marketing insights firms used to measure. And Dave, you were talking about sort of like the way that you can sort of aggregate data and what people pay for and invest in as a brand. I think we're turning that on its head to really find out, going straight to the source and saying, all right, let's look at this in a really shocking new light.
Well, the allocation token, that it could be a game changer, because that you're not only using it to build the brand, but you're also, and engage with the community, but you're building a whole new revenue line, that is basically, it's brilliant. I mean, that's every company is always looking for something like that. And, you said earlier, David, you said, the value equals the utility plus the brand equals value. So it'll be really interesting to track the allocation tokens and to see how much of that, goes into that value. Fascinating, really.
100%. It's really, really interesting. Like, look, we just kind of came up with the idea and we launched it just to see if it would work. And like Tony and Carmelo were super nice about doing that. We've since launched another one with another very tall gentleman in Australia. Not a basketball player, but doing like a amazing new, like super high end Coonawarra cab out of California. And we launched another one, and like that's gone really well. Or I'm sorry, in Australia, that's gone really well, and it's really super interesting.
Wow. So, Jana, maybe now is the time we do raffle off. We'll start talking rewards, and we'll start talking gifts and all the fun stuff. So, you want to do spin the wheel and see who is the lucky winner of this session?
Yes, we're giving away. So, when we do these Learn to Earn webinars, we like to give away some wine. So, we're going to be giving away a magnum of grower champagne. I'm going to put this up here. Hang on a second. Here we go.
Are panelists eligible?
We
ready?
You know what? I think we can.
This is so cool.
Kaylin, we can get you some champagne, girl.
Don't you threaten me with a good time. Oh, Charles.
Oh, Charles.
Congrats.
Congrats, awesome. Charles. That's awesome.
Listen, Kaylin, next time you do one of these with us, you're going to be drinking that big bottle of champagne on the bike. So be careful what you wish for.
Like I said, don't you threaten me with a good time. I accept the challenge.
I love it. Maybe we'll get a Jeroboam for you, Kaylin, because that would be really good.
And okay. Let's also, Jana, talk a little bit about the rewards, because Charles is the only one that's getting the wine, but everyone is, here you go.
Yeah.
Everyone is earning points.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to go ahead and claim this this token, if you scan the QR with your smartphone, you'll be able to claim. It's basically a proof of experience that you attended this event, and it's going to come with 2,500 points towards a VIN airdrop. So we are launching our native token at Breakpoint in Singapore in September. And as soon as that token goes live, we're going to be airdropping everybody who's attended our events this year some VIN coins. So make sure that you scan that and you will be in on the airdrop.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah,
Thank
awesome.
you so much. And also, Kaylin, I have to say, I have never heard anybody talk like the way I could listen to you all day, but you know what I just noticed is that if we go back like 15 minutes in this recording later, Dave actually says, I don't know what else to say. And I don't know if I've ever like seen anyone get him to say, I don't know what to say. Dave can always say something. So congrats.
Wow, that is probably a higher honor than the Magnum. I honestly have to say I couldn't appreciate it more. Thank you so much. I'm a modicum of passion comes out. So what can I say? But thank you guys all for bearing with me while I sway to and fro on this bike. But we did it.
We did it.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. I mean, this was fantastic. And I mean, I just love this whole concept of these allocation tokens. This is getting my mind spinning. This is fantastic session.
Cool, right?
Yeah, it's awesome. Really awesome. And as Jana had mentioned before, stay tuned for our next one, which is going to be July 10th with Michael Juergens of Deloitte. And that's going to be a really interesting one. You guys are going to get an email on that. And we'll send you an email also with all details on the rewards as well. So you'll receive that at the end of the day today too. So thank you to our amazing presenters. You guys are just phenomenal, and thank you for everyone who tuned in. Thanks for sharing your afternoon with us, or morning, or evening, wherever you are, in whatever part of the world.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
Dara. This
so
was great.
much.
And thanks,
Thank you.
Kaylin. Great to meet you, and we'll see you in New York.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye.